Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalatu wassalamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilman. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. From Yusuf's story, which we narrated yesterday, we learn what it looks like to be in command of the Nafs al-ammārah, the nafs that commands towards evil. Many of us, however, are not as much in control of ourselves as Yusuf was when faced with strong urges. And so it is very easy to fail the test of temptation. In this verse from Surah Jasiyah, which is our point of reflection today, the Quran talks about such people. It says, "Afaraita man ittakhadha ilahun hawā." Have you then considered him who takes his low desire for his God? And Allah has made him err having knowledge, and has set a seal upon his ear and his heart, and put a covering upon his eye. Who can then guide him after Allah? Will you not then be mindful? Afala tazakkarun, Allah asks at the end. So, this is a verse that can cause quite a bit of confusion. So let's discuss it a little bit. In this verse, Allah is asking us through the Quran, inviting us to observe, to reflect upon a person who lets their desires control him. Whatever their feelings tell them to do, they do. They may not literally worship their feelings as we do God, but they surrender to them. Their actions are in the service of removing discomfort and feeling good in the moment. So this is what the Quran means when it says, who has taken his low desire, his hawā, for his God. Now, in context of our discussion of Nafs al-ammārah, we could say that when someone gives in to the whisperings of his lower self and submits and surrenders to his lusts and desires, he would fall in the description of this verse. Now, the word that Allah uses is hawā, which refers to the soul's inclination towards passion and lust. The root of the word meaning carries meanings like to blow or to fall. Scholars explain that this suggests something that tosses a person around like wind and ultimately causes them to fall or to tumble. It can overthrow a person, that is his hawā, his lower self, can overthrow a person and lead them into ruin. And a related word from the same root in the Quran uses elsewhere, it describes falling into an abyss in the hereafter. The same root is also used to describe emptiness, such as the empty hearts of disbelievers on the day of judgment. Now, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, the intelligent person is one who takes his soul to account and works for what comes after death. The foolish person is one who lets his soul follows its desires, yet continues to hope in God. So let's discuss a little bit about what it means to take desire as a God. None of us would admit to that, right? We wouldn't think that we let our temptation and our urges become God. But let's, think about the fact that a God is something that we obey without question, that we submit and surrender to, that we prioritize above everything else, that we organize our lives around, that we sacrifice for. And so when someone takes his hawā, his desires, his impulses, his whims as his God, it means that desire or that lust becomes the ultimate authority. Instead of letting values, guidance, or better judgment drive decisions, actions are in response to the question, what do I feel like right now? Now, here's the thing. It is Allah who's created these desires and impulses within us, right? They are not evil within themselves. They serve very important purposes. However, the desires, the hawā, was always meant to be a servant and not a master. Now, the scary thing is that modern culture has so normalized giving into desire, right? For example, we see and hear statements like this everywhere. Follow your heart, do what feels good, live your truth, you deserve it, you only live once, right? All of them implying that if you feel like doing something, just go ahead and do it. Why? You only live once, so why not just live it up? Now, the thing is, what happens when feelings become your Lord? When desire becomes the decision-making of our actions? Modern psychology would call this the tyranny of impulse. Now, we know that feelings, impulses, and cravings can be very intense. They can be so strong that they hijack our brain and cloud our better judgment. We've all wondered at some point, right? I don't know what came over me, or I cannot believe I did that. I cannot believe I said that. I wish I hadn't, right? So another thing about feelings is that they're not always in line with our better judgment, our values, or our goals. And I keep coming back to this example. My goal may be my health, for example, and my cravings for chocolate are not in line with this goal. Now, the good news is that feelings are temporary. They rise and they fall. And, if you read even a little bit on feelings, on emotions on the internet, you will find this out, that they are not stable. Feelings tend to be quite fickle. And how many of us has experienced this, right? We feel good one minute, we feel intense grief the other, we may be laughing, we may be crying, we may be sad, resentful. All of these happen within the space of a few minutes, right? Now, research on urge surfing and impulse control shows that cravings peak and fall like waves. And if we don't act immediately, they pass. And this is a very important thing for you to know. Even strong feelings, by some estimates, it only takes about 90 seconds for a feeling to go, to peak, to get into full intensity, and then kind of become not so intense again. There's many ways that we keep the feelings going, by our thinking patterns and all of that, but that's not what we're discussing today. However, when we give in the moment, when those feelings are at a peak, for example, and we obey every impulse, what we're doing is we're strengthening the neural pathways and training the brain to expect instant gratification. The more we do this, the stronger the impulse gets, right? So we also weaken self-regulation and literally allow ourselves to be tossed like the wind, which is what the verse says, right? According to our temporary whims. The more we give in to momentary cravings and temptations, the stronger they become. So when our mind tells us just this once, right? When it tells me every night, just this once, just eat this one piece of chocolate, I have to recognize that it is lying. It is not the truth. Giving into a craving once is not going to make it go away. It will give us temporary relief. Absolutely. That's why we do it, right? However, it will have long-term consequences because the pathways that are bringing this temptation to me are going to get stronger. So this insight from psychology helps us understand the statement in the verse, which says Allah leads such a person astray. So this does not mean that God misguides people arbitrarily, not at all. The Quran explains elsewhere that God misleads only those who persist in wrongdoing. In other words, going astray is the result of a person's own choices. Because of repeated wrongdoing, their hearts become veiled, covered, or sealed, preventing true understanding. Can you see how that happens, right? That the more we do something, eventually the neural pathway in our brain that leads us to that action is getting stronger, and our will to resist is getting weaker, right? So our brain is a constant stage of kind of hijack according to those whims and temptations. Now, many verses describe hearts being sealed or covered so that they can no longer grasp spiritual truth. And if we understand it from psychology, this is what it means. So when someone follows their vain desires and treats their cravings like something sacred to be submitted to, those desires become a covering over their sight, their hearing, and their heart. And as a result, what the Quran tells us is that words of truth no longer affect them. In this state, they're no longer worthy of guidance, and so they remain astray. Because it's very hard to get out of a state like this. We all, know people who struggle with addictions, and how challenging it is for them to come back and how often they relapse again, right? So their neural pathways have become very habituated towards giving into temptation. So the cycle of a stimulus or a craving and the reaction of giving in, it now happens on autopilot. So, scholars explain that God has provided every person with the means to find guidance. But when someone wrongs themselves and insists on following error, they deprive themselves of that guidance. It is not God that wills misguidance for them. Rather, the deprivation of guidance is the natural result of their choices. Is this making sense now? Can you understand how that works? So it's not guidance that disappears. It is our capacity to hear and respond that weakens. We now have an addicted brain. We are blinded and made deaf by the strength of our desires. We keep giving in. We are enslaved to our temptations against our own better judgment. But here's the thing. Islam came us to liberate us from slavery, including slavery to our own impulses. Islam explains that true freedom is not doing whatever we want in the moment, because remember, our feelings are fickle. True freedom is having the ability to choose what is right and in our long-term best interest, rather than over what is easy in the moment. So the verse ends by asking, will you not then remember? Or will you not then be mindful? This is one of Quran's many invitations to reflect, to think deeply, and to awaken spiritual understanding before it's too late. So our reflection or our practice for today is learning to pause. And this is one of the most powerful spiritual and psychological practice. And it is incredibly simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is very simple, which is that we need to practice creating a pause between stimulus, for example, a craving or an impulse or the desire to talk back to someone. It could be any number of things. So we need to create a pause between the stimulus and the response we give it or the reaction we have. So, and the thing is that in order to build strong neural pathways, in order to build our ability for self-regulation, we need to do this repeatedly. It is not something that is a one and done kind of situation. So when an urge or temptation arises, simply pause. Name it. I'm having a craving for chocolate. I really want to answer that text. I really want to answer that text by reacting or being in anger. Notice it. Notice what is happening in your body. Notice that you are feeling this urge to act, and simply breathe. Now, I know there's 4 steps, pause, name it, notice it, or rather notice it, name it, breathe. Now, research shows that even 6 seconds of pausing gets our better judgment back on track. 6 seconds of awareness weakens the illusion that desire is a God which needs to be submitted to. Yes, it's only 6 seconds. So can we practice pausing for 6 seconds today before we react or give in to anything? Just play with yourself, play a game, Before taking that piece of food at iftar, pause for 6 seconds. Before drinking a sip of water, pause for 6 seconds. Again, the more we learn to pause, it will strengthen our neural pathways, inshallah, and we will no longer let our desires become our gods. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.